The Silk Road. Just hearing the name probably brings up these incredible images, right? You're thinking of adventure, these massive camel caravans loaded with treasure, stretching for miles across deserts and mountains. But what if I told you that that story, the one we all think we know, is actually more of a modern myth than ancient history? Today, we're going to unpack the reality behind that romance. Yeah, the popular image is just so epic. We picture this single 4,000-mile superhighway that directly connects China with the Roman Empire. You can almost see it, can't you? A constant stream of merchants, braving unbelievable dangers, all to trade precious silk for Roman gold. I mean, it's a fantastic story, definitely the kind of thing Hollywood would eat up. But here's the twist. That's not really the whole truth. And honestly, the reality is way more complex and I think a lot more interesting. The idea of one single Silk Road, that's actually a surprisingly new invention. And it was never, ever just one road. Okay, so to really get our heads around this thing, we've got to start by taking apart the name itself and that romantic idea of one single road. All right, now check out this timeline because this is pretty wild. These routes, they were active for more than 1,500 years. And get this, even Marco Polo, the guy we all associate with these travels, never called it the Silk Road, not once. The name itself was only invented in 1877 by a German geographer. Think about that for a second. That's a gap of more than 400 years between when the route started to decline and when they finally got their famous name. Just incredible. And this quote here really just hits the nail on the head. It was never this one single path. It was a massive, sprawling, always changing network of routes. So, okay, if it wasn't one neat little line on a map, what did it actually look like? So let's dive in. The best way to think about it is, well, it's less like one big highway and more like a whole circulatory system. You had these winding trails on land and then these huge sea lanes on the water. Together, they were the real arteries of the ancient world. And these maps here show it perfectly. On the one hand, you've got the land roads, this crazy web of paths, some going north, some south, all trying to get around these massive, treacherous deserts and mountains. But then, look at the other map. You've got the Maritime Silk Road, this huge network on the seas, linking ports all the way from Southeast Asia to East Africa and up into the Red Sea. It was a two-part system. And traveling on these two networks, totally different ballgames. On land, almost nobody went the whole way. It was more like a relay race for goods. A merchant would take something a certain distance, sell it to the next guy, who'd take it a bit further, and so on. And with every handoff, the price went up. But out on the sea, a single trader could actually sail the whole distance. And a ship, well, it could carry way, way more than a caravan of camels. The trade-off, of course, was you had to deal with pirates and some seriously nasty weather. Okay, myth number 2 we need to bust, that this was all just about silk. Now, don't get me wrong, silk was a superstar product for sure, but it was only one small part of what was really the world's first great exchange. Yeah, for the super rich in Rome, Chinese silk was like the ultimate status symbol. It was the luxury item. But this was absolutely a two-way street. For China's Han Dynasty, one of the biggest reasons they even pushed to open these routes was to get their hands on these incredible, powerful horses from Central Asia. They called them heavenly horses, and they were absolutely vital for their armies. And really, that's just scratching the surface. The best way to picture it is like a giant supermarket stretching across continents. Heading west from the east, you had tea, dyes, perfumes, beautiful porcelain, paper, even gunpowder. And coming back east from the west, horses, camels, honey, wine, gold, fancy glassware. It was this incredible flow of stuff that literally reshaped entire cultures and economies. But you know what? You could argue that the most important things being traded, you couldn't even see them. They weren't things you could hold. The network was basically a highway for what we call cultural diffusion, the spread of ideas. And man, what an exchange this was. Entire religions traveled along these routes. Buddhism made its way from India and became a huge deal in China. A form of Christianity, called Nestorianism, spread deep into Asia, and so did Islam. You had philosophy, science, brand new technologies like papermaking moving west, which totally changed everything. Even art styles were traded. But there was a dark side to all this connection. The same routes that carried beautiful silks and exotic spices also carried the plague. Yeah, this network was one of the reasons the Black Death was so devastating in Europe. So a network this huge and complex doesn't just pop into existence, right? It had to be built, it had to be maintained, and it was all thanks to a really fascinating cast of characters and the power of massive empires. See, since almost nobody traveled the full route, the whole system depended on middlemen. And the most famous of them all were the Sogdians. These were merchants from Central Asia, and for centuries, they basically ran the east west trade. Their language became the common tongue of the trade routes, kind of like the English of its day. If you wanted to do business, you had to know it. And this timeline is awesome because it shows you that big, stable empires were the real engine behind all this. First, you have China's Han Dynasty, who kind of kicked the whole thing off by providing security. Then you have the Roman Empire, which created this huge, wealthy market that was just hungry for Eastern goods. Later on, China's Tang Dynasty brought in a real golden age of trade and culture. But there was one empire, one that would unify it all like never before. And that was the Mongol Empire. In the 13th century, they created the largest single-land empire in the history of the world. And for this one brief, unbelievable moment in time, what's called the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol Peace, meant the entire network on land was under one government, all the way from the shores of China to the Danube River in Europe. It was this short-lived but incredible era of globalization that made travel safer than it had ever been. But of course, an age like that couldn't last forever. So let's talk about how the classic era of the Silk Road finally came to an end and how we can still hear its echoes today. So what happened? Well, it was really a domino effect. First, the Ottoman Empire rose to power, and that made the old land routes a lot harder and more expensive for Europeans. So what did they do? Countries like Portugal and Spain started looking for a way around, by sea. That search led directly to the Age of Discovery. And just like that, the whole center of world trade shifted, moving from those dusty caravan trails to the open ocean and European ships. The cool thing is, today, the actual physical remains of this incredible network are finally getting the respect they deserve. UNESCO has stepped in and designated parts of it as World Heritage Sites. They're working to preserve these old caravan cities, the temples, the paths themselves, all these things that tell the story of centuries of human connection. And the concept of the Silk Road is maybe more powerful now than ever. You see it today with China's Belt and Road Initiative. They even call it the new Silk Road. It's this absolutely massive infrastructure project, building new trade routes to connect Asia with Africa and Europe. It is a direct, intentional echo of that ancient network. So, when you boil it all down, the Silk Road was never just a road, and it was never just about silk. It was really the world's first great experiment in globalization. This sprawling, messy, incredible network that connected people. It brought us amazing goods, sure, but also world-changing ideas, new technologies, and yeah, devastating diseases. It was connection, for better and for worse. And that makes you think, doesn't it? It leaves us with a pretty big question for our own time. What can this ancient network teach us about our own hyper-connected world?